Since the very beginnings of humanity, we have in our collective conscience held the notion of the divine, a supreme being, a creator, a god. In every civilization, every culture, there has existed this divine conception in one form or another. But is this sense of the divine or supreme being simply a byproduct of our evolutionary past, a coping mechanism through which we sought to explain perplexing physical phenomena, or something that is a part of our human nature because our Creator designed us in this way? Humanity has puzzled over it, reflected, disputed, and often killed over it. Man's search for meaning seems to be a reflection of this profound curiosity his rational faculties give rise to, and as long as humans remain human, they will always search unrelentingly for an explanation of their own existence as well as that of everything else they experience. Those who at times may question the relevance of such a search for meaning, or refuse to see the usefulness or need for it, simply do so as a show of helplessness of not having found those answers. This is borne out by the fact that were they to be told that scientists have finally discovered the answers to these great questions of existence and meaning, they would be all too eager to find out. Therefore, it is worth our time to reflect and think deeply about the single most important question of all. Is a maker behind all we see? Is there a God? Perhaps the most intuitive and common reason offered for God's existence, independent of any religious tradition or scripture, is known as the argument from design, which in the light of modern scientific discoveries has once again been heavily discussed and debated. In making this argument, I wish to reflect on its appeal and logic, but also the common objections put forth and to what extent they undermine its force. Our eyes, ears, tongue, brain, intellect, limbs, heartbeat, respiration, and so on all carry a strong impression of being carefully created. Since the Creator is not found within ourselves, we are compelled to look for an external creator. This, so to speak, intuitive reasoning is so spontaneous that we need not consciously develop any logical argument for it. This is perhaps the reason why a majority of believers, irrespective of their particular faith, believe in a higher power not because of some well-formulated argument, but because of an inward sense or intuition. The same affirmation of the Creator takes place as we perceive the external world, since it too gives a strong impression of being meticulously made. Our creatureliness and that of the universe is so obvious that owing to it, one of the four horsemen of New Atheism, Richard Dawkins, could not imagine being an atheist at any time before 1859, when Darwin's Origin of Species was published. He refers to it with terms like apparent design and asserts that eventually we had to give up the idea of a purposeful designer as the theory of evolution came along and explained the biological world's design. We will return to this point later. However, elsewhere he expressed that we could have a serious discussion about and make a reasonably respectable case for a deistic creator who devised the laws of physics, God the mathematician, God who put together the cosmos in the first place and then sat back and watched everything happen. Likewise, a number of eminent and leading physicists such as Paul Davies cannot help but comment on the inescapable conclusion of a designed universe when considering the evidence of a finely tuned universe. This shows that there can hardly be any disagreement, if at all, as to the creatureliness or design of the universe and need for its explanation. It is then argued that religion attributes this creation to a mindful external creator, but atheism assumes the mindless universe to be its own creator, an assertion which not only lacks any evidence, but even worse is self-contradictory. Advancements in science and technology has made it ever so clear that the awe-inspiring dispositions or powers of matter and energy are not self-explanatory. The unfolding of these powers has shaped a universe exhibiting thorough planning, diligence, deep wisdom, meaning, beneficence, beauty, harmony, mathematical order, control, self-sustainment, and so on. All this is impossible without knowledge, wisdom, will, and volition, but matter and energy are void of these. Hence, the universe ought to have an external mind behind it, the mind of an all-wise and all-powerful Creator. Here, we have inferred the existence of God to explain the existence of the universe. Such an inference to the most likely or best explanation of some observation is formally called abductive reasoning or abduction. Abduction is ubiquitous in all fields of study, including science. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy states, philosophers of science have argued that abduction is a cornerstone of scientific methodology. For the cynics and skeptics who may have reservations, it is worth giving some examples to show just how reliant even some of the most important scientific theories are on abductive reasoning. One example of abductive reasoning is the theory of evolution, wherein common descent is inferred as the most likely explanation of available data, showing variation within species. Another example is the discovery of subatomic particles, whose existence cannot be directly perceived but inferred from their effects. Yet another interesting example is the research for extraterrestrial intelligence, SETI, wherein radio signals are monitored from the outer space for semantic messages. The underlying idea here is based on abductive reasoning that if such a message is received or intercepted, it would be indicative of other intelligent beings in the universe. In 1982, a petition from Carl Sagan advocating SETI was published in one of the most prestigious scientific journals, Science. The petition was signed by 68 scientists, with 7 Nobel Prize winners among them. Since then, many expensive projects have been undertaken, and much more collective effort is dedicated to SETI. Therefore, inferring the existence of God to explain the existence of the universe is based on the same kind of reasoning that is applied in scientific fields of inquiry. And so, if in this life man sometimes refuses to acknowledge God, is it not then mere obstinacy? For how could it be otherwise, when he on one hand denies the existence of God, but on the other remains eager within his scope of knowledge to seek an actor for every action, a planner for every plan, a character for every characteristic, an effector for every effect, and a knowledgeable, wise organizer for every organized system? All the knowledge he has acquired is a product of such pursuance. Here one may argue that this is not always the case. For example, the atheist Darwinists do not seek any wise organizer for the organization present in a living cell. Instead, it is attributed to chance and blind, random, purposeless, and unguided processes working over long periods of time. This, in fact, is the very contradiction in the atheistic view. Nowhere else in their lives would they be intellectually satisfied without finding an actor for even a simple action, let alone such a marvelous unit of life. For example, for actions like theft, murder, or even a few symbols found on a cave's wall. One may argue that the human agency or mind is sought here simply because these are empirically known actions of intelligent beings. Let us use the same argument to analyze, for example, DNA of the cell. Each DNA molecule contains complex, specified information, a feature not simply analogous but identical to language. Since the only source of any language is intelligence, we are compelled to infer a mind behind DNA. The Oxford mathematician John Lennox reminds, and I quote, "Carl Sagan thought that a single message from space would be enough to convince us that there were intelligences in the universe other than our own. However, when it comes to inherent powers of matter, enabling it to evolve into numerous awe-inspiring entities, like the cell with semantic information, and to bring about spectacular phenomena like mathematical laws of nature, they are conveniently explained away as by chance. What can be more unacademic than this? It implies that not even a decent hypothesis is there to put forward against the idea of God." End quote. In his book, The Blind Watchmaker, Dawkins argues that the apparent design in the biological world can be fully explained by the theory of evolution, rendering any purposeful designer irrelevant or redundant. Again, Lennox can help us get rid of this myth. Firstly, this thesis commits a category mistake in that it confuses two different levels of explanation, i.e., God an agent and evolution a mechanism. The mechanism of, say, assemblage of cars in some automated car plant can be explained solely in scientific terms. However, it does not make the other level of explanation of the plant redundant, namely that it is there because some intelligent minds carefully set it up and are constantly supervising it. Both these complementary explanations are necessary to give a holistic explanation of the plant. It is the same with explanations of the universe, writes Lennox. God does not conflict or compete with the laws of physics or evolution as an explanation. God is actually the ground of all explanation, in the sense that he is the cause in the first place of there being a world for the laws of physics to describe. Offering people the choice between God and science is therefore illogical. Secondly, numerous prerequisites for evolution, such as the inherent potential of matter or laws of physics, are taken for granted in such narratives which, as we have discussed, clearly indicate the involvement of an intelligent source. There is no alternative explanation for these except blind chance. Thirdly, it is pseudoscience anyway to claim that natural selection is the explanation for the existence and apparent purposeful form of all life. Natural selection does not explain the existence of life. Rather, life-immutating replicator at least must first exist for any selection to take place. But then it is asked, who created the creator? This is a secondary question with no bearing on the question at hand, i.e., if the universe is self-explanatory or points to a mind behind it. A chair from its very being necessitates a carpenter, whether or not the carpenter himself is created. If upon meeting God he happens to be created, not self-explanatory, then we shall look for his creator too. But how can we evade an immediate question because of the one that has not even arisen yet?